Welcome back to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and I'm joined again by Nick Mattei here from Forbins Finest. We're going to keep this conversation going. Now, Nick, in the last chunk, we jumped around a little bit here and there. I was hoping to get into some specifics now, and we talked a little bit about the seed to sale tracking. You're the first person who's ever told me about RFID tracking on plants. So, would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the tags that are used by Metric, which is I'm not sure if they're the biggest, but they're one of the biggest seed to sale tracking companies here in the US. Their tags are RFID trackable, so you can scan them, and that just makes for really fast production. You don't have to enter in a number. Now I think they're moving to QR codes, which is a little bit lower cost and the same ease of use. But basically every plant in Massachusetts, any plant that is larger than 8 inches tall has to be tagged and traced. So say in your nursery, you take cuttings from a mother plant, you purchase and they issue you tags for all of those plants. So you make an identical copy of that plant. All of those plants get an individual tag, and they are tracked from basically the point that you create them, whether that's from seed or from a mother plant where you're taking a cutting. Those plants are tracked from your nursery to your bedroom or to your flowering room, wherever those plants move in your facility. That's documented, and then when they're harvested, they are weighed wet, weighed dry. When they're processed into smokable flour or some other product, the trim, the stems are weighed. It allows for complete tracking and transparency from the get-go, basically all the way to the final product. So when you buy a package of smokable flour in Massachusetts, you can look on that container. There's a number that you can enter, and you can trace that back to the batch of flour that the batch it was grown in, when it was harvested, who it was processed by. If you buy concentrates, it's traceable from start to finish, which is, in my opinion, it's great. It's actually really helpful as a grower and for a cultivation company. It provides you a lot of data that might actually be difficult or costly to collect and organize on your own. So I'm probably one of the few growers in this state that is very supportive of track and trace. I don't know. Have you asked any of your other guests about track and trace?
Now that you mention it, I feel like it has kind of gone under the radar on those interviews, but I should be asking about that. Yeah.
I've talked to quite a few other growers in the state, and I understand why, especially for smaller growers, it's a pain. I mean, complying with that system is problematic. It's time consuming and expensive for a grower. But look, the deal is, without track and trace, it's really hard to have any sort of enforcement. And if you don't have enforcement, you're going to have bad actors that are going to take advantage of the situation. And I've seen that in Maine. That's been one of the big, that was the real eye opener for me, watching a lot of medical growers in Maine. Basically one foot in the black market, 1 foot in the regulated market, and that's not good for retailers. It's not good for growers, and that's why I support track and trace. I think it's an important piece. When you buy liquor at the liquor store, when you buy beer, there's a batch number. If there's a problem, you can trace that all the way back to the same batch. You can recall every product that was made with those ingredients. So to me, that makes sense. But the biggest thing is puts all the growers and the retailers on the same playing field. And as much of a hassle as that is and a cost to growers, I think that it's really important and for the long-term success of the regulated market. Um, if retailers have to compete with the black market, or if retailers are competing with the growers that are supplying them but also selling it on the street untested at a lower cost, that's not good for the retailers. If I'm trying to um, run a cultivation facility by the book and follow the law, then it's really hard for me to compete with another grower who is able to line their pockets, or possibly just you can survive on black market money, but we're all trying to build a business that is profitable and successful, and you want to be able to show that your business is doing well. That's kind of the whole idea of bringing all of these growers to the regulated market. And I don't want to have to compete with growers that are able to supplement their income on the black market, because it's going to force me to essentially do the same thing. And I've seen that in other states, and so I'm concerned that that could be a problem here.
Well, let's keep an eye on that, because I also think that that's a great point you made, and you're really one of the first guys to raise that point that I've spoken with.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it.
Like I said, man, I've seen it in Maine, and it's just, it sucks for even the growers that are, I know a couple guys, and it's like, man, if I don't sell on the black market, money's tight, and every other grower that I know is selling on the black market too, or they're sending it out of state, and I just don't want to see that happen here in Vermont. So
well, on that note, have we had any movement on the license applications?
No, our application's in. We're excited. We have Angela does that part of the business. I'm not sure where exactly we're at with that, but
cool.
our app's in.
Tell me a little bit. Listen, tell me a little bit about. I want to know about some nerd stuff about like soil and that kind of stuff, and nutrients. Is there any program for tracking like what kind of nutrients you're using and that kind of thing?
Let's not jump off track and trace quite yet either. I lost my train of thought there for a second, but so the Cannabis Control Board definitely wants to know your cultivation methods. They want to know your water usage. They want to know your runoff, your wastewater plan. If there is runoff, a lot of growers nowadays are able to grow without any runoff, which is like, ideal. So the Cannabis Control Board wants to know some of that stuff. As far as metric or track and trace, that doesn't necessarily track your soil, but it does actually track not only your product, but it also tracks seeds. So if you're breeding and you're in a seed production business, your seeds are tracked. Basically everything having to do with cultivation is tracked. So jumping back into that, you can scan that jar of flour, you can scan that concentrate, you can trace that batch, through the processor, through the batch that it was grown in. But you can also track seeds, which, a lot of folks may think is not all that helpful, but it actually is really good on the state level. It provides a ton of data as far as yield per square foot, yield per cultivar, to be able to kind of just look at that globally and see what the standards are, and who's doing really well. Why is it that these growers are able to pull a higher yield, or more harvest per year? Like, all that data is really helpful for regulators to help continue to shape the rules going forward. So sorry, I forgot what your question was.
No, you're doing great, man. Look, I'm kind of bouncing around. I was talking about some. I was going to get into some water.
Soil. Yeah, so water usage is big, right? So we're doing rainwater collection here. That is really important to me.
That's super cool.
It's super cool. We're in downtown Barre here, and we're on town water. We're on municipal septic. So we have to pay for water, so that's one incentive there to not want to use a lot of it, but also to not tax the municipal water supply. Cannabis is like really heavy consumer of water. And so we're doing rainwater collection. That's really important to minimizing your water use. And the way that we grow, there's no runoff either. So basically, all of the inputs that we put into our soil stay in the soil, and they don't ever leave. They get consumed. And not only that, so we actually are implementing a system of condensate water collection too. I know Tito Byrne mentioned that he's doing that at his facility. I'm like really happy to see other growers jumping onto that, because that's something that I've been preaching and installing for some grows in the last few years. And basically what that means is in indoor cultivation, you have air conditioning basically that is cooling, and you have dehumidifiers or some sort of system for moisture removing. Sometimes they can be combined into one unit, but basically you're cooling and you're removing moisture, and all of that water, even when you're cooling, air conditioners produce a lot of water. They condense the water by dropping the temperature. That's like dew point. Your water comes out of the air. Instead of that going down the drain, we are going to be collecting that and purifying it through a filtering and sterilization equipment, and then it goes back to the plants. So it's kind of like it's your own ecosystem in the indoor cultivation.
Yeah, you got your own little water cycle going on.
Exactly.
Right
and very little water. Once you have water in the system, you're adding like 10% of what you would be adding in if you were not collecting all of that condensate. You're 10 to 20% of your water. So 80 or 90% reduction in water usage, which is like, that's amazing.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's serious.
Especially if you're on town water.
Wow, that's kind of impressive.
Yep. No, it's really cool, and it's taken off. A lot of growers are moving to that because cost ultimately matter, and growing in the black market, you don't see as many environmentally conscious growers, but that's certainly one thing I've seen in Maine and Massachusetts. Once you have to be really transparent, it drives growers that might not even be as interested in sustainability or reducing their inputs, but when they see the cost savings and the general the public, people like that. People like companies that are doing things to conserve water, and so I see a lot of guys jumping on that.
I think everybody should be concerned about that. Honestly, I think water quality is going to be one of the big issues of our time.
Yeah, definitely. And there's still a lot of folks that really don't want to see cannabis in stores. There's still a lot of folks here in Vermont that don't necessarily like that, and the less ammunition that we can give those people, the better is the reality of it, because no one wants to paint a picture of cannabis cultivation. You're leaching all these salts or pesticides into the wastewater. You're consuming massive amounts of water, huge amounts of electrical energy, because that's the other part of indoor cultivation.
Yeah.
It's like really resource heavy. So the whatever you can do to minimize that, it's better for not only your company and your bottom line, but also, of course, the environment. And so that's been a big thing for me right from the get-go. All my days. And so we didn't really get into my cultivation style, but I'm a long time hydroponics grower. Like I was gonna get into that. Yeah, dig right into that. Yeah, that's what I did for years. And so I started out in soil, actually, which was like organic soil at the time. I didn't really know the difference, but that was what I had available. Actually, the first grow I ever did, I actually just took soil right out of my garden at my parents' house. I was like a teenager. I'm just like, okay, plant them in some soil, like let's see
Nice.
what happens. But I did spend many years growing hydroponically because it was the easiest way to go. I tell people, it's kind of a joke, but I tell people I was born and raised on general hydroponics 3-part, and there is not a grower out there, even like the living soil no-till only growers, like they know what general hydro 3-part is. And um, living soil's taken off in the past few years too, but I think most growers my age, like everyone's kind of been through the phases. But I spent years growing hydroponically, which was a lot of fun. It's like a really techy way to grow. It's like a science experiment more than like a horticultural thing. And so that was really great. But then as I became more environmentally conscious, I actually worked for a couple years to develop an organic hydroponic system, which I was successful with and worked really well. The only downside to that is that you're still pretty heavy with the water consumption. There's no way around having to, at some point, um, basically dump your water and start new. And there's processes you can do to kind of reduce that, but it ultimately is costly.
What kind of
So
runoff? What kind of runoff do you get from those kind of operations in your wastewater?
a lot. Even if
Phosphorus, nitrogen, like
Yeah, I mean, typically it's going to be a mix of a little bit of nitrates, but a lot of phosphorus, a lot of potassium, calcium, which is not necessarily as harmful as some of the other ones, magnesium, but a lot of salts too, which is they all of those minerals are basically available in their salt form. That's the form that plants need to easily be absorbed. And so that runoff, if it ends up in rivers, it's not good. If it ends up in soil, it's even worse
no,
because
that'll give you some of those algal blooms, right? In the
oh,
lake.
definitely, yeah, yeah. You're talking about like algae blooms. The aquatic life does not like freshwater. Aquatic life does not like high salt concentrations, and in soil, if you have high salts, you're not going to get poor soil quality. It's not good
Sure,
for the
yeah.
soil,
So
especially
how do you
as
treat that?
um, once it's out in the environment. That's not my specialty, but
Right. Are you guys required to treat it though before that gets released?
no. So the if you are a hydroponic grower and you're dumping your wastewater, it needs to be managed. So it needs to go to a wastewater treatment facility where they're basically going to process all of that out into solids, and then ultimately it ends up actually in the landfill, which is where everything lands
Hmm,
eventually.
no doubt. Yeah.
That's just the reality of that. Um,
Probably not the
there is
worst.
always
Probably
going to
not the worst thing in the landfill.
It's not the worst thing in the landfill. Ultimately, humans create garbage, and we create all industry creates waste. That's part of the price that we pay for the life that we get to live, and all the nice things that we want.
It's a
But
great point, man.
yeah, I mean, it's tough because a lot of people don't want to hear that. There's always going to be waste. There's always going to be some sort of waste. Even your water purification systems. It's like you don't want to release all that into the environment, but the water goes back to the environment. The solids that are taken out are contained and put in the landfill typically. But that's still better than just dumping it into the environment.
Sure.
But nowadays, a lot of growers have transitioned to what is called living soil,
Yeah.
and that is essentially a replication of the natural environment. And so you have a fully live soil with different amendment. You're adding in amendments. There's never any waste that comes out of that. The water that you feed is consumed by the plants, transpired by the plants, and then either goes back outside as condensate or is recirculated through your system. And rather than feeding nutrients and flushing them away, it really to try not to get into the science, but basically you're testing.
Get into the science.
Get into the science.
Get in there.
So you got to test your soil. You need to be doing at least monthly testing of your soil and monitoring the available nutrients. And so you re-amend your soil based on what the lab is telling you your soil is, where your soil is going. As levels start to decline, you're able to track that, and so you can amend specific ingredients to supply specific compounds and keep your soil balanced. And that is probably the most eco-friendly way to grow nowadays, because there's no wastewater and your inputs are really minimal. You're basically consuming all of your inputs, because instead of just blindly adding and then flushing out, or with hydroponics, you start with a balanced nutrient, and as the plant kind of consumes some of those nutrients, the balance is off. And that's why with hydroponics you ultimately do have to dump and start new. Or with reverse osmosis, you can remove all those minerals that are in your water and then start with a clean slate on your water. But living soil allows you to basically feed the soil, and the soil feeds your plants. It's really low impact. It's not zero impact, and that's something that I point out regularly, because a lot of these amendments, I won't say that. So there's a lot of no-till living soil growers now that are actually trying to source as many ingredients locally as they can, which is like even cooler to be able to utilize locally sourced ingredients. That's like the lowest impact. There's no trucking, unfortunately. A lot of the inputs, even for a living soil, do come from all over the world, or at least all over the country. So there's always going to be some sort of impact, but it's still lower in that regard. And it's also less impact because it's less processing. So your amendments are more of what you would call like a raw ingredient, rather than a processed and chelated mineral that is, basically mined from the ground and then chemically processed and then used. So that's a great way. It's a great way to grow.
Cool. So in terms of impact, that seems like a nice lead in to ask you about the packaging piece of this situation. I know I'm going to let you, I'm going to smash my computer. Hang on. Why don't you go ahead and tell us, because I really liked what you were doing with your packaging, but I'll let you kind of describe that for everybody.
Cool. Great. Yeah, I was looking around. I don't actually have any jars right here.
Hang on. Oh, shit.
You got one?
Oh, yeah. Hang on.
Yeah. So our packaging is, we chose early on to use glass packaging, and there it is.
Sorry.
There it is. Yeah, we chose early on to use glass packaging. I believe that glass is like the ultimate container for. Zoom does not want to see that. Yep. So that packaging that's a glass container with a child resistant lid. The lids are made from recycled ocean plastic, so they've already been recycled once, which is something that we are really proud of. And of course they can be recycled again, but like I mentioned earlier, so we chose really early on to go with glass before the CCB decided to ban plastic containers, which I fully support. Part of a new industry, a new can't think of the word, but we have the opportunity now to really shape what cannabis sales look like and packaging. And so I'm really supportive of the CCB banning plastic. I'm a little disappointed that there's no language regarding hemp plastic or even corn plastic. Like some of the biodegradable plastics, I think, have a place in the market. And there's certainly, again, it's that more sustainable thing. nothing is going to be zero impact, but I'd be happy to see, like hemp plastics as a, a packaging material. But we went with glass because I think it preserves the the product the best. And so we chose that early on, and then the CCB decided to just a month 6 weeks ago, they decided to ban plastic containers altogether,
I
which is
thought they made a little bit of exception for ocean reclaimed plastic. Did that not go through?
I'm not aware of that. I'm actually not sure.
I know they discussed it in one of the meetings. I wasn't sure where they landed on
Okay.
that though, because I also, it seems like to make a package with no plastic, like what are we talking about now? Are we talking about 100% glass? Because
Yeah.
where
Glass or metal. Yeah.
yeah, right. And
Yeah.
metal, okay, I could see, but
Yeah.
if you're using the ocean reclaimed plastic, which I really like, by the way, I think is a super cool idea. Um,
Yep.
and especially it has to be tamper proof. Like, oh, if you have 10 doses of edibles, it has to
Mhm.
be, you have to be able to open it 10 times,
Reclose it. Yeah. It's got to be
which,
reclosable.
yeah. And they were talking about, oh, it's got to be opaque. I'm glad they dialed that back a little.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you got to have black glass
Hmm.
packaging, which is not the easiest to get a hold of, from what I
It is
understand.
not. We actually got some black glass, and I really liked the looks of black glass, and ultimately the UV proof, UV blocking black glass is probably the most ideal container for cannabis. But it's expensive to make, and I actually like. I'm happy with the clear packaging, and most cannabis, like if you leave it on your windowsill, then that's on you, basically. But I'm glad to see the opaque packaging removed from the regulations, because it's just silly. I mean, let's be real here. Seeing cannabis is not going to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Um, and my understanding of the rules around the containers is the container cannot be plastic, but the lids can be. So because it's really hard to find packaging that gives you tamper-proof, child-resistant packaging that's not plastic. That's affordable.
True.
So yeah, so I mean, I think we'll see a lot of glass packaging, and the reason that they banned plastic altogether is it really comes down to the Mylar bags that you see like everywhere now with edibles. And the problem with Mylar is that it's not recyclable in
Yeah.
any way. So
It looks like some of that DuPont non-stick,
yep.
C8 kind of give you cancer material.
Totally. And like, you use it like one time and throw it away. You
Yeah.
really can't. I mean, you can repurpose it, but like who's doing that,
And
you know?
I spoke to a guy who's using it, and actually I wanted to bust his balls a little bit when he explained how much the alternatives were. It was like, I can't even really be mad about as a business
Yeah.
owner, I can see why people are
Yeah.
making that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the glass is expensive. Metal tins are expensive too, but so we're going to offer a recycling program with our packaging too. So we're going to be all of our retail partners will be accepting our containers back, and so we will either recycle them or refill the jars. Possibly, we're working with our label company and hoping to be able to offer a product packaging that actually there's special labels that come off in a dishwasher, like a commercial dishwasher. So that's
Right.
that's something that we're entertaining, although it's harder than you think
I know.
to
I was
make
gonna
it
say,
work.
even with these like pre-rolls, like that's a sticker on there that
Yep.
you gotta
Oh yeah.
sanitize. You gotta
Yep.
sanitize this whole package, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You have to sanitize the whole package. You have to take the label off. Um, Paper labels and soy ink, there are actually like plant-based glues that release at like 180 degrees and are water soluble at that temperature. So that's
That's
something that we're
awesome.
playing around with.
It's a bummer because
But
I'd just bring this in and be like, hey, throw another pre-roll in there because I don't really give a shit.
yeah, some people don't give a shit. There's people that do though, that don't want that, and so it's hard to please everyone in that respect. Um, and then after COVID, so many people are really
True.
really in tune with like somebody else has used this package. Like I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, but
That's a fair
we're
point.
definitely going to be offering recycling. So we will, whether that is some sort of a discount for bringing back your containers, or just a straight up recycle program, that we're going to try to do that. But we're working hard to come up with packaging that will allow us to actually process all the jars and reuse them if possible. But one of the concern around that, the biggest concern is what the compliance labels look like, and if we have to put a compliance label like Massachusetts does on the jar, that's probably going to be a vinyl sticker, just because that's the way those work. And getting them to do like a paper label with a plant-based glue that releases, like that's pretty far-fetched. So
Yeah.
but we're gonna try. But just getting people to recycle. If we can get people to at least recycle our packaging and offering 100% recycled packaging,
you're gonna be able to do that on site at the dispensaries, right? They're gonna have recycling
Yep,
facility, like whatever stations set up.
exactly. Yep, bring your containers back and we'll recycle them. In fact, we
Cool.
may. We're hoping some of the retailers we've talked to, they're like thrilled with that idea. They're actually interested in offering like recycling for all cultivators, not just us. So basically, anybody that's in a
That's nice.
recyclable packaging. Yeah, I think that's a great, like, let's promote that at retailers, right?
I agree. I'm with you 100%. Listen, Nick, we got about 5 minutes left here. This seems like a good time to I feel like we're gonna do these two and we're gonna follow up later with this. But
Cool.
before we get out of here, let me ask you, I've been asking everybody this question. If you could rewrite the legislation, man, what would you keep and what would you throw away or change?
Wow, that's a question I'm not prepared for.
Good. You catch you off guard a little bit, buddy.
Yeah, let me think about that. I mean, honestly, I've been really happy with all of the legislation that I've seen. I mean, I know that there's people that are not thrilled with all of it, but ultimately, I mean, I've seen in Massachusetts, I would not be here today if we lived in Massachusetts, if we had the regulation that Massachusetts does. There's just no way that we could pull off a grow, even of our scale. And there's like no such thing as a tier 1 grow in Massachusetts. It's like, so ultimately I'm really happy with, and like I mentioned, I know the CCB members are. I've talked to James very briefly, but I did have a chance to speak with Kyle and Julie now a few times, and they really want to see. I know I said this before, but they really want to see Vermont growers like successful, and they really want to make sure that they do their job and that they do the best they possibly can for the industry here in Vermont. So I'm really quite pleased with the regulations. I'm not sure what I would change. Honestly, the nursery license, that is a big thing. The THC caps have been removed, or the recommendation is to remove the THC caps on flower. That is a great thing that I was disappointed to see from the very beginning. One thing that I would change, one thing I'm a little disappointed with, is the regulation regarding edible packaging. Right now, it's 5 milligrams per dose with a maximum of 50 milligrams per package, which a lot of people could say that's probably fine, but so if you've ever bought any of those products on the black market, like you'll have a hard time finding a 50 milligram product on
Yeah, right.
the black market.
I usually get like 500 at a time.
300, 500, that's
right.
pretty much the normal.
And that's what I want.
That's what I want. Yeah. I mean, so my happy place with edibles is like 50 milligrams, but I do recognize that not everybody likes a dose that much. I mean, I have friends that take like 200 or 300 milligrams a night.
I don't know how they stand up.
I don't know how they do that either. And I know medical patients that like regularly consume like 200 to 300 or more even. I'd say 200 to 300 is a pretty standard dose for a medical patient that's been using edibles as part of their treatment plan. And so like the 50 milligram per package is just, it's a little small. So down in Massachusetts, even it's 10 milligrams is the maximum dose per serving.
Yeah, I went to a dispensary when I was down there.
Yeah, so that's a little bit more realistic in my opinion. Rather than totally ban those products, I think an additional warning would probably be better than banning outright, because we are going to have to compete with the black market on some level. And the goal of the CCB is really to bring in legacy growers, black market growers, and give these guys a place in the regulated market. So when you look at that, we have to compete with the black market on some level. And Vermont, like I said before, it's a small state. Ultimately, we are going to be competing with the black market. And so I think that finding a balance between protecting people and being relative with the black market is it's kind of tricky. With anything, like education is the best. So rather than banning a product, why don't we educate people on what a normal dose is? Like if you've never eaten an edible, or if you're specifically like especially sensitive to cannabis at all, like you should probably start with 2 to 5 milligrams. It's like a great place to start. If you're a daily consumer or if you're a regular edible consumer, like there's a good chance that 5 milligrams is not going to be what you want. And so that's definitely something that I would change. The caps on concentrates, that's something that I would change too. I'm sure you've heard this.
I don't want to cut you off, buddy, but we're going to get cut off in about 30 seconds here.
Okay. No, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. So that's what we got to change.
Great place to wrap. I really just want to say thank